Hi, this is Chris, Video Game Dust Sleeves, and you're listening to the VGDS podcast with Bandana Gamer,
Lap my grits.
DanCavDragon,
Tally ho.
Bone06,
Oh, Jesus. I'm here. I'm here.
and Guest Gamer Dad Level Podcast.
No one expects the space horses.
Oh, man. And on this English version of Sleeve It or Leave It, first title is Ape Escape. Bandana?
This is one of those, like, gaming blind spots I have. I have no knowledge about this game other than a lot of people love it. Since I know nothing of it, and it's a disc game, I'm going to say, nah.
Bones.
No, I'll pass. I'll pass on it. Sorry.
Dad Level.
So my only experience with Ape Escape is the add-in they did for Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and I wouldn't sleep this.
And DanCav.
I don't have this game, so I would like to get it, but I would probably sleep if I did. The only thing I will say about this game is that it made use of every single button on the controller. Like, I think this game was designed with the PlayStation controller in mind and trying to use every single button just to show you, like, hey, this system has more buttons than ever before.
Like a David Cage game.
What's that?
Heavy Rain and
Oh, yeah.
Skulls.
Yeah, it made very innovative use of the controller, I would say. Yeah.
Next title, and everybody knows this guy. Crash Bandicoot for PlayStation 1 as well. Bandana.
I mean, this is significantly one of the best games on the console. And honestly, I think this is a better 3D platformer than Super Mario 64. So a little controversial hot take there. And I will say, also, one thing I love about this is playing Uncharted now. You can see how, I mean, there's a nice little throwback in Uncharted 4 to Crash, but you can see the roots of Crash Bandicoot in Uncharted 4 as you play that game. So yeah, I'll sleeve it.
Bones.
No, I'm going to pass on it.
Dad Level.
I agree with Banana's point about this being a better game than Mario 64. And I would sleeve it. I'd probably 3D sleeve it just because, like, the tear, probably have him popping out of it.
Good eye. DanCav.
I was gonna say exact same thing. Like 3D pop this sleeve, this cover definitely looks like it was made for that. So yeah, I would sleeve it for that.
Next title, Metal Gear Solid. DanCav.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best games of all time. So I would definitely sleeve this. I mean, it's not much to sleeve here, but I mean, it's worth sleeving.
Oh, I can change that. That doesn't. That's not an issue. Dad Level.
I would totally sleeve this as one of my favorite games. And I would even ask if you could do, like, the metallic red on the sleeve.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I have a new product now that can make that metallic-y. So yeah, Bones.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 for 3 on these. And the funny thing is, PlayStation games are one of the most logical games that I found to actually get sleeved for the sole purpose of they get scratched up real easy. And the other thing is a lot of them, the hinges are broke on them.
Mm-hmm.
So the fronts and stuff fall off. When you have them in a sleeve, they don't fall apart. But it's just not my thing to sleeve. It would have to really be a special game like Doom, Final Doom, for me to want to put a sleeve on it. So I'm going to have to skip all of them.
Bandana.
I mean, we're probably going to gush out on this title multiple times throughout this podcast. And God, how beautiful and understated is that cover? I mean, it's needlessly iconic. I mean, I don't, I mean, yeah, sure. Let's just go with yes, so I don't running off of the mouth.
This was particularly, this Leave It or Leave It was particularly for Dizzy, but he's not here. Grand Theft Auto, but the Japanese variant, because this one looks a lot better than the American. And that leads to another podcast we're going to do eventually, which is going to be box art differences, East Coast, West Coast. We just haven't had a chance to do that. It's going to take a lot of brainstorming to get that one going, because like a lot of stuff has to be talked about. Got to get some good questions for that.
You know what you need for a lot of brainstorming? A lot of brains. I'm not sure if this is that group.
Oh.
I'm in the group. I insulted myself.
All right, DanCav.
Well, now you framed it that way, I would probably leave it. Yeah, because this, I will agree, this artwork is better than the American version.
That level.
Probably just because it's an import. I don't know. I mean, I played this game, at least the American version of it, but I really didn't get into the series until 3. So
Yeah, I think typically that's where everybody really came in. It got like from the basic 1 to 3, big difference.
yeah. Over the top. And that was what kind of cool about 3 is that you had that camera angle where you kind of make it look like that for a little bit, but it wouldn't stay that way.
Right. Bandana.
I mean, for all the reasons we've just kind of said, I'd say no, just because the series doesn't start till 3. No one likes these.
Pretty much.
No one likes these at all. They're terrible. They're terrible.
They are pretty bad. I played a few of them.
Yeah, they're fun for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's good.
You're like a
I will
toothpick.
They did a cool expansion thing. There's like a Grand Theft Auto London where you have to put the first game in, and then you take it out and put in the expansion disc, and like it, it's like a computer expansion at the time. Now what we call DLC, and it's really interesting. Like that, I don't know why they didn't make it a separate game, but or the other flip side is like why more people didn't do that and didn't do game expansions on the PS1 because you could do it like that. It just a fascinating little history thing for the system that comes out of that series that really doesn't start until 3.
Cool. Bones, you're a no, right?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna pass on it. It's not that I don't do imports. Like I have a 64 imports done, but yeah, no, I'm gonna pass on that.
All right. On to guess that box art. Anybody know the first title?
It looks familiar. That's about all I can say. I don't really know what it is, though.
I do.
I was gonna say, Bones, you better know what the hell this is.
Oh my god, I definitely know. I knew by just the giant eye, let alone the car in the back.
Yeah, I'm out.
Dan?
I think I know it too. Is it the game that you got Bones recently?
Yeah.
And it is Motor Tune Racing.
You're close.
Ah.
Bones? Bones?
Motor Tune Grand Prix.
Yep. I mean, you had it, Dan, but PlayStation 1.
Okay, makes sense.
Next title.
I know that one.
I mean, I could tell you what movie it's from.
Go ahead, tell me what movie it's from.
Yeah, because that's the title.
Yep.
Okay. It's clearly Kung Fu Panda. I mean, Aladdin. No, it's clearly Disney's Hercules.
Yes, sir.
The most faithful adaptation of any product ever.
But it's not the best version of Hercules on that system, though.
No.
Does Serbo have one? Does Kevin Serbo's?
No, they did the Herc's Adventure game.
Oh, nice.
That was really fun. I think LucasArts did that one. I think.
Well, as you can see, there's a trend here. We're talking PlayStation 1. So, Bones, continue on.
Okay, and this month we have a wonderful logo sleeve that is how about that closer upper? Uh, yeah, I've never heard or seen this one before. So
All right, so this is an
I'm kind of at a
ongoing.
stump.
This is an ongoing. I guess a joke for a Do You Nerd. So this, honestly, this is not available for sale unless Lacey ever gives me the permission to sell these.
Yeah, I was a little confused when I'm looking at it. When I read the title and I'm looking at the dust sleeve, I'm like, am I being pumped here?
For some reason, I don't know. The sleeve gets talked about a lot because this is the one I did the like 3D squishy butt. Like if you ever see it, it's somewhere. I'm sure it's on my Instagram. It's on their YouTube channel. They did an unboxing of it and all. So like if you want to ever check it out, definitely go to Do You Nerds YouTube channel. And they're great people, by the way. So,
They are the best people on YouTube.
So definitely give them a follow.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like legitimately two of the nicest human beings you will ever meet.
That
Well,
is for
whatever
sure.
game's going in there must be an adult game, I would say. So let's just say the adult Atari games.
What about the Playboy game or what was the other one on the PlayStation? Jeez. All that controversy about.
I think you definitely need a wisdom tree game in there.
Exodus.
There is a oh man, what's that one with Pamela Anderson in it? It's a PS1 title. I can't remember the name of it.
Is it
That-
VIP?
Or VIP. There you go.
Well, if anybody's interested in this, you're shit out of luck. So don't hit Chris up.
Oh man, I could try my best to try to get Lacey convinced that it's okay to sell these, but until then, unfortunately, they have the only one. All right, Dan.
All right, franchise of the month. Of course, we're talking about PlayStation, so yeah, our franchise month is PlayStation 1 themed. There are 3 questions. The second one is hard to read, but I'll read it out. But the first one is, you can see the titles here, just as an example. But true or false? The PlayStation 1 is responsible for launching some of the best franchises in video game history. And shown here are some of those franchises: Resident Evil, Crash Bandicoot, Grand Theft Auto. You can read the rest. Silent Hill, blah blah blah. But several franchises that I think are still around today got their start on the PlayStation 1. Do you agree that the PlayStation 1 probably contributed most to some of the best franchises that we play today? We'll start at the top with Bandana.
Okay, so the question I'm reading says the PlayStation 1 is responsible for launching the best franchises, not some of the best.
Okay. However you want to take it.
So I want to get very legalistic here and be very precise in our language. No, I mean, the PlayStation 1, hands down, is one of the most important consoles in history. It continued a lot of amazing series from the previous generations, but it also, I mean, we still, we just got a new Resident Evil this week. Crash is all over the place. Persona has exploded way beyond what it was on PlayStation 1. Tekken 8 is on its way. Gran Turismo, looking at the things I'm seeing on here, only thing I really think that has kind of gone away is Medal of Honor. And maybe Wipeout.
I would say Twisted Metal as well.
Yeah, Twisted Metal. Well, there's a TV series coming though.
Hmm.
Like it is like Anthony Mackie. It is on the Peacock. It is like in production, if not post production. So yeah, I mean it just is an amazing little point in video game. And man, Sony created an amazing little system out of spite. It's awesome.
All right. And if you notice, Bandit, I put all the greatest hits versions there for you for most of these titles.
Thank you.
Bones, what do you think about these franchises being some of the best in history, thanks to the PlayStation 1?
Well, I mean, I would have to say there's definitely a lot of really good franchises in there that definitely influenced over the years to continue more and more titles coming out. I mean, yeah, there's still a lot of consoles that had other franchises, so this is only part of them for sure. But you have a lot of really good ones on here that did continue for years to go. I actually have a bunch of them, believe it or not. So I think I'm only missing 2 out of that, and it's Wipeout and Persona. But every title you have up there, I have all the rest of them.
Oh, nice. Because it shows you that definitely these are some of the most common and most important franchises. How about you, Dad Level?
I'm gonna go true on this. There's a lot of games not even listed here that started on the system. I mean, Suikoden.
Yeah, a lot of RPGs. I didn't list.
Yeah, a lot of RPGs. This was the system for RPGs, but like even Tekken. I mean, Tekken became a major competitor in the fighting game scene against Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. And
Tekken is on there, right? Yeah, Tekken's on
there. Chris, any take on this?
I mean, from the point of, is it some of the best franchises? Of course. You still have them being produced today. Like, and what are we on? The 5th gen of this console? So, like, 4 gens later, and we're still producing games of these titles. So, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know we got Mario's, Sonic, and Zelda. I was just seeing if anybody thinks that these franchises outweigh those at all. But
I mean, it's a different console in
Yeah.
different time. I mean, if you had one console, you probably didn't have the other one. So, I mean, for when I got the PlayStation, a lot of these titles were ones that I definitely had. I definitely played. Like we were saying about the Tekken. Like I have that collector's book that has all the Tekkens that were released, like all the way through PS1 through PS2. Like there's like 6 or 7 discs in the damn thing. So they definitely were important.
All right. And then the second question is the most important franchise that the PlayStation 1 gave us is, and it could be one of these or it could be something else that I didn't list. So let's start from the bottom this time. Chris, what do you think?
I know for sure for me, just because this is what I had growing up, I didn't have many games, so for me, and it still has a place in my heart, is Twisted Metal. So I know a lot of people are probably gonna be like, "What the hell?" But that's what I had. Like that was my go-to game for PlayStation because that's all I had. Like I had like maybe 5 titles to play. So
Yeah, it could be what's important to you, or it could be
definitely
in history. Yeah. But yeah, you'll have to check out that TV show that Bandana mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Yeah, that's good to know, Bandana. Thanks.
How about you, Dad Level? Most important franchise PlayStation 1 gave us.
So I don't want to steal Bandana's thunder, but Resident Evil. Resident Evil actually started the survival horror genre. Officially, you know. I mean, there was scary games on other consoles, but I mean, the whole survival horror style that we got, because we got Resident Evil, Silent Hill and Clock Tower and many more in that Polygon era. So, but yeah, Resident Evil is the most important, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, I'll just get that out of the way. And I would agree. I mean, in terms of sales, I'm sure that probably makes the most money out of any franchise today running, thanks to the PlayStation 1. Bones, how about you?
I'm not going to go with us. I'm going to go with what it gave me, and I'm going to say Final Doom on the PlayStation 1 was like one of the most important games for me. I don't want to say for us because, I mean, I could say any of those titles.
Right.
So I'm going to go with one for me, and I'm going to say it was Final Doom because
And
that was awesome when I
that's
had that.
that's why I answered it the way I did too. It was more like a for me instead of a for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final Doom, was that the first? Is this the right platform that it started on? Like, did it come out during the PlayStation 1's?
As far as I'm aware, it's the only console it's on, period. Like, I don't even know if it might be on PC. I would think they probably have it on PC, but it might have been just an exclusive. I don't know. I never really looked into it. But it is only on PlayStation for home consoles. I've never seen it on anything else.
All right. And Bandana.
Okay, the most important franchise the PS1 gave us. I'm gonna answer the question a little wonky. I'm gonna go a little wonky on this one because while technically the franchise started elsewhere, it's kind of like Grand Theft Auto. Like, yeah, it was on PS1, but it didn't really start on PS1. It started on PS2. I'm gonna say Metal Gear Solid is the franchise because let's be honest, Metal Gear would have just kind of been a neat little niche thing in history that not many, especially the American audience, would have really still be talking about. But I mean, Metal Gear Solid, to me is where the franchise starts, and that I think is one of the most important hitter. I mean, because that also just revolutionized storytelling in video games. So.
Well, yeah, you sort of answered question 3. These are titles that did not start on the PlayStation 1, but because the PlayStation 1 did such a good job with this particular franchise that it really helped anchor it and make it what it is today. So, true or false, the PlayStation 1 was mostly responsible for this franchise's success. And that would include Final Fantasy, Castlevania, Metal Gear. Do you agree with that, Bandana?
Yeah, and that's mainly because Final Fantasy VII. While that's a huge point, where it becomes a mainstream series. It still had I still think fondly of the Super Nintendo and think of its roots in the Super Nintendo. And Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which was honestly meant to be a throwaway game for Konami. Like, hey, we've got this 3D one coming out on the 64. Let's let this Iga guy just throw something together for the PlayStation. And it blows up, but Castlevania still has its roots in the 8-bit, and when you think of the series, you don't just think of these Final Fantasy VII. You don't just think of Symphony of the Night for Castlevania, but like when you think Metal Gear, your first thought is of Solid, and it really like propelled that it took the Metal Gear franchise just to another level. So much so that I think a lot of people were surprised to think, oh, there's a Nintendo version, and then of course there's the MSX. I think that was the PC that was on in Japan.
Yep, MSX and MSXP.
Yeah, it was. I think for a lot of people, it was surprising to find out there were older games in that series.
All right, and Bones, agree, disagree, anything to add?
Well, I look at, because of the way the question is, I'm going to say that for the franchise's success, yes, Final Fantasy was out before, but yes, the PlayStation really did hammer it home and made it even more popular. Castlevania, I won't say, because they were so popular in the NES through Super Nintendo that this just furthered the people that wanted it, I feel. And Metal Gear definitely was straight on PlayStation. You think of that almost immediately. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't think of Metal Gear because it was so hyped for the PlayStation.
Yep. And how about you, Dad Level?
So I guess I come at this in a different perspective, playing all the previous games before, except for like Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. When I thought of Metal Gear and having a new Metal Gear game, I was super hyped. I was like, man, taking the game that me and my dad played through and beat when I was younger. Well, actually, both of us were younger. And the one thing that was cool about the PlayStation is it took these franchises to a whole new level that wasn't able to be done on on previous gen consoles. So this was the birth of the Polygon era. And then, the thing about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, it's an iconic game. It, stands the test of time. But the one thing that's great about it is it takes the formula that was created from Castlevania Simon's Quest and amplifies it to 100. It takes what could have been possibly a great game on the NES and just makes it better. I mean, yeah, we got voice dialogue, we got really amazing hand-drawn sprites, 3D backgrounds, fun gameplay, and then we're also not thinking about outside the box because besides just Final Fantasy VII, we have 8 and 9 and Tactics and other games that we couldn't have gotten on the Super Nintendo. So, of course, they took these franchises to a whole new level on the PlayStation.
Yeah, good points there. How about you, Chris?
I mean, there's not really much that I can add that they didn't already say. So I just agree with what they say.
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't like Final Fantasy VII as much as the earlier the SNES ones, but I agree that this one became very visible, and a lot of it due to the presentation, the cutscenes, and it was a lot of marketing hype. So that's where I think a lot of people got introduced to the series. Castlevania, the whole term, we use the term Metroidvania to describe a lot of games, and I think this is the game that really started that, because the way you had maps and the way that the levels were very intricate and stuff. So
it was actually it came from a review of this game that because Castlevania had gone in such a Metroid route, that really Metroidvania was not meant to be a genre. It was meant to be this specifically, this kind of Castlevania. I think Jeremy Parrish, who leads a podcast now called Retronauts and writes some really cool books for limited run games, is the guy who came up with that phrase.
Oh, really? That's interesting. But yeah, I hear it used a lot these days, and this game, a lot of people, at least my friends, really got into Castlevania with this game, and I was just like, where were you guys, for the previous generation? Because Castlevania has been around for a while, and they would say, oh, that game, Castlevania was too hard on the NES, but this game is actually fun.
I kind of have to agree with Bones though. I feel Castlevania is definitely this wasn't the success of Castlevania. Castlevania has always been a big title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it may have been a big title, but the thing is that this is what defined the direction that most of the games went in. This increased the popularity of the franchise. It's just in what Dan just said. He had friends that never played the games before. Some people didn't have Nintendos. They just got a PlayStation, and then that's the first game they ever played. Or maybe they tried to play it, but they don't have all the time in the world to be able to play a game, so they couldn't get good at it. At least with Symphony of the Night, it allows you to kind of teach you how to play the game the first part, and then it gets harder as it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And Metal Gear, I could talk an hour about Metal Gear. It's one of my favorite games. But yeah, definitely. I actually played it on the NES, beat it, and I didn't. It was okay, but it wasn't definitely not one of my favorite games of all time. But when I played this game, I was just completely blown away. So yeah, this is one of the best games of all time. So for sure, I think this definitely defined the series as a whole. But yeah, that's it for Franchise of the Month. Some PlayStation 1 titles. A lot of good games there. So sets us up for a good discussion, I think.
Alrighty. So obviously, the topic we're talking about today is a system podcast. This is actually podcast 82, and it's PlayStation 1, obviously. From all of our talk, PlayStation 1, a little bit of background, was developed by Sony, if you didn't already know that.
Really?
Man.
I mean, you never know. A young kid could come across this podcast and not know.
Well, I mean, it was supposed to be developed by Sony and then released by Nintendo, but
Yeah. And it was released in Japan December 3rd in 94. It was released in US September 9th of 95 and in Europe September 29th of 95. It is a 5th gen console. It competed against the N64 and the Saturn. A total of 3,061 PlayStation games were released, with cumulative sales of 196 million units. The PlayStation rose to power in the video game industry. It received acclaim and sold strongly in less than a decade. It became the first computer entertainment platform to ship over 1 million units. And that's a little background. Now on to the questions, which we kind of modified before we started, so thanks to Big Bandana.
Wow, that's like so unnecessary.
No, it wasn't. I'm giving you thanks.
I mean, I am great at everything.
Aren't you?
Also, I do want to like take one little point before we end and like say like little critique. It competed against the N64. I don't think I would have called that a competition.
I wouldn't either.
I mean, the N64 was 33 million units. The Saturn I know is less than that, and the PlayStation 1 is like hundreds of units.
I think if you go back and you read, I can't remember exactly, but I remember reading something about when the PlayStation first came out, it did not sell over what Saturn sold. Saturn sold more.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
And then months later, PlayStation took over and they sold many more units than Saturn, obviously.
I mean, they got so aggressive going after the third-party publishers. I mean, they were letting people publish games on their platform and like taking such a minimal cut. Everybody wanted to be on PlayStation, and that's just what got the eyes over there.
Right.
You know, but yeah, we can go into
Continue.
specific questions because I don't want to edit anything else. And
You sure?
I mean, let's be honest. I'm still slowly working on turning this into the Bandana podcast.
Man, you've been in it for the long haul.
This whole Well, I took some time off. I've lost some ground. But please continue on with what we pretend is your show, Chris.
Okay. Question 1. Your experience with the console. Have you played it? If so, when was the first time? Bandana.
I've never seen one of these in my life. So my experience was, I was fairly PlayStation resistant. When it first started, I liked the Saturn more. Virtua Fighter caught my attention. I wanted a Saturn. I got a Saturn. Then, of course, the N64 caught my attention. It was like, oh, Super Mario, is it a 3D thing? But after a couple of months with this Nintendo 64 and then them announcing Final Fantasy VII, seeing Mega Man was going over to the PlayStation, I actually ended up selling my N64 within a year after I got it to get a PlayStation. And still, I will say to my dying breath, the PlayStation is a far better console than N64. I actually look at the PlayStation as the true successor to the Super Nintendo. So I think the first time I played it was in 95, 96 at a video game store called Microplay. But yeah, I love this console, and we've already gushed about so many of the amazing titles on it. And Sony did an amazing job cultivating and getting third parties to jump to their platform that you just could not ignore it. And the games were so cheap. Oh my gosh, like games were nearly half the price of what they had been when they were cartridges. Like new first run games were sometimes like $40. Which was just freaking awesome, coming off like cartridges which were 60, sometimes 80 and 100. It was a great console, and it was just marketed so damn well.
Bones?
For me, I have great experiences with this console, so I do have good nostalgia. I have played it, of course. As far as the first time, I'm trying to think if I knew anybody before the moment that I have in my head, but I'm drawing a blank. So first moment that I can recall is my buddy getting it, and I don't think it couldn't have been exactly when the system came out, because he got it out of Christmas. I do know that. And he had Twisted Metal 2, Final Doom, and you know it, Chris, Motor Tune Grand Prix. So those were the first 3 games that I played on PlayStation that I can recall. I know my other buddy had gotten PlayStation and the 64, but I think he got his after that. No, you know what? That is it. I did remember it. My buddy had it when it very first came out because he had the long boxes. He had Mortal Kombat. He had, I think it was it Virtua Fighter, or what? That wasn't Virtua Fighter. It was one of the fighting games.
That Arena Toshin didn't.
Oh,
Probably because he had the long boxes. That's what made it jump out at me, because that was the first time I saw the long boxes, and I thought, man, these things are actually really neat.
And man, did they want Battle Arena Toshinden to be a thing.
Yeah, they did.
3 games.
But that probably was the very first time that we played it.
That level.
So my first experience for it was my dad coming home, renting the console from Hollywood Video with Resident Evil, and us playing the heck out of that, but didn't realize that we need a memory card. My dad went, got a PlayStation officially, got a memory card for us. It was, of course, 2 Mad Cat memory cards, which you guys probably understand where this is going to go. But we ended up getting Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and I think it was Alien Trilogy. But whenever 7 came out, though, I got to the end, was in the final battle for Sephiroth, and died, and went back to go try to get some few more items at the Northern Crater, and my game save did not come back. It was corrupted. So yeah, I went and bought me a regular PlayStation memory card. But yeah, no, the system is one of my all-time favorites, and yeah, it left an impact on my teen years.
And Dan?
Yeah, no, something Bandana said resonated with me. That was, I was also very anti-PlayStation when it first came out, because I was a big Saturn fan, and I didn't like the push towards polygons. I wanted to. I thought all the games were fine in 2D, all the fighting games, platformers. I didn't see the point of all these 3D, and the 3D polygons weren't that great at the time. It didn't look that great to me, and I mean I could see where the technology was going, but I didn't think that necessarily made for better and more fun games. So I was a little bit resistant to it. So I didn't buy it. I was not a day one owner of this console, but the first time I did play it was on day one when it first came out. Some of my friends ran out, bought it right away, and brought it home. And it's funny you mentioned Battery and Toshin, and that was a launch title. So that's the game they brought home with this console. And I was not impressed. I didn't think it was that great. But I mean, obviously, more and more better games came out. Final Fantasy, Resident Evil. So that made me want to run out and buy the console eventually. So I did. And yeah, it's all the games we mentioned earlier. It's definitely one of the most important consoles of all time. So so yeah, I mean the games really helped sell it and support it, and back to the direct competition against N64. That's why my N64 collection is very small relative to these other systems, because at the time all these great games were coming out for the PlayStation, and I was just spending all my money on PlayStation games versus the N64. So yeah, definitely took me a little while to like it, appreciate it, but definitely there's no denying that it's one of the best consoles I own.
Number 2, do you collect for this console? If so, how many games do you own for this console? Bandana.
Yes, many.
Yeah. Bones.
Of course, I collect for this. I have 201.
Dad level.
Yes, probably 165 or so.
And Dan.
Yep. I have 480 games for it so far.
Number 3, impact of the console on video game history. Bandana.
I mean it. I mean it changed the game. I mean, first of all, it was like what watching someone come in with a steel chair and take out two professional wrestlers in the ring. You know, Sony and Sega and Nintendo had dominated the conversation, and then Sony just kind of came out with a steel chair.
And said, fuck you, Nintendo.
Yeah. I mean, they out Sega. I mean, Sega's whole thing was we were the cool, edgy system, and they came in, and they hired a lot of the people that had made Sega the edgy system, and just went really hard into getting those Nintendo had done such a terrible job of cultivating relationships with third party. They acted like they were the only game in town, and Sony came in and was like, hey, you want to come make this game for a lot cheaper and put it on our console that's selling like hotcakes? The Sony PlayStation, as we've talked about, is still a brand that's ongoing and still in the fight. And then on top of that, you have 3D fighting and 3D gaming that really starts and mainstreamed with the PlayStation. And on top of that, you have the mainstreaminization, I'll make up that word, of RPGs. I mean, RPGs had been such a niche little market, and the PlayStation just put them out on the forefront, and there were so many amazing ones. I mean, of course, Final Fantasy VII is what gained attention. I'll let Dad level talk about Suikoden, but that's another one, amazing one. I remember when I got my PlayStation, the first game I got with it was Wild Arms.
Fantastic game.
I wish I could go on and on about all this for a while, but it just made a huge, huge impact that we're still feeling to this day.
Bones.
I would say, in my eyes, the impact this console really had the biggest effect on would be, it was like the end of the true cartridge-based consoles. This was the first really successful CD-based one that proved that moving forward, everything's going to be, for the most part, CD-based.
Dad level.
For the PlayStation itself, I mean, you're looking at Sony, a brand that makes electronics that, completely innovates. You had the Sony Walkman and their CD players and their Laserdisc and all that stuff. That was one of the cool things about the PlayStation in general, is it was the ability to play music on it. You couldn't do that on certain consoles at all, because it was one of the first, besides the Saturn, that had the ability to have compact discs, which is something you'll see as you go on through the systems itself, with the PS2 with the DVD player, and then PS3 and 4 and 5 with the Blu-ray or 4K. So but it really kind of ended the console wars at the time between Nintendo and Sega, because it had the software, it had the peripherals, everything was at a set price. You weren't going into a place and Nintendo jacked up something just because they know they can. But for me, it was really the software, all the new franchises, them taking old franchises and innovating them and making them better, and the little cool gimmicks. like Banana was talking about for Suikoden, the one thing that I liked about that game was being able to take my save data from the first game and transferring it over to the second one. There was little cool features like that throughout the system that you couldn't get on other consoles.
Dan?
Yeah, no, I mean, this console came out in 1995. It's 2023. I'm playing PlayStation 5, and the last game I got was Resident Evil 4, a remake. So the game that started on this series. So I think that all says it all. I mean, 30 years later, we are still, there's still a dominant player in the field. So I think it's definitely had its impact on video gaming history for sure. And yeah, just to reiterate the point that Bones just made about this was the first. I think this is what made discs viable. I mean, we had Sega CD, we had TurboGrafx CD, you had Sega Saturn, but none of those systems did well enough to. And I don't think CD technology would have been a thing unless this console came out and totally proved everybody wrong. Back then we had loading times, and everybody complained about them, but it's funny how we don't really complain about that much today. So, that span of time that the technology has come a long way. So this definitely everything started. The path that we're on now that started, pretty much with the PlayStation 1.
Number 4, current state of collecting for this console, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, but when I thought about this question, what I was thinking was like, how easy is it to collect for this console today? If you wanted to collect PlayStation 1 games, is it like impossible like it would be for the Sega Saturn, or is it really accessible? And I think PlayStation 1 gaming in general, I think is really accessible. I mean, I said earlier I had 400 games, and most of those games that I collected were in the last couple of years because they're still affordable, they're cheap. In the beginning, I just collected the games I really wanted. The several big titles that came out at the time, my collection was under 200. And then in the last couple of years, I would go to these game conventions, and you can get a ton of PlayStation 1 games for really cheap. The one booth that I always go to always has a sale for like, 5 games for $20 or something, and so that's a lot of shovelware, a lot of garbage, out there for this. But it's very easy to collect for the system, and there's a lot of good games that you can still get very affordable. I mean, I think a part of that's because the media is cheap. Discs are were relatively cheap, and they made a lot of games. They made a ton of games, and the copies are still out there. So I think collecting for this console is pretty easy these days.
That level.
I agree with that, because I mean, unless you're looking for some of those higher end RPGs, then it can be a bit expensive. But it's always been that way.
Bones.
Yeah, like they said, unless you're going after those expensive titles, and every console, let's be honest, has expensive titles if you're going after them. There's no avoiding it. Every single console is going to have those expensive ones. But everything, for the most part, is still accessible. You can still find it. eBay, at random stores. I found Parasite Eve at the store. I mean, you can still find the stuff. I'm not currently collecting for PlayStation 1, though. Not actively, let's say.
Bandana.
The state is good. No, yeah, I think that's no. The state's good. It's not. Yeah, you're not generally finding them at your local thrift store anymore, but you still can get them anything you're looking for fairly easily. So it's a great console to collect for.
All right. Number 5, the games. This console's best known for which type of games? Bandana.
I mean, to me, I think of it. Yeah, there's two genres that really stick with me for this one, and that's role playing games. That I've already talked about, like the mainstream, how they drifted into the mainstream because of the PlayStation, and fighting games. I think some of the most amazing fighting games, the Saturn definitely handled 2D fighter games better, but still you have some amazing, your Street Fighter Alphas, and then of course you have the 3D fighting games coming over. Tekken, Tekken clearly made its big stamp on the industry, and then this a lot of people. I don't sing the praises of this game enough, but I feel like it's such a important moment in that Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, which was the first 3D Street Fighter, and now Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5 have both used 3D models for their fighting games, and it's like that was the first time it did it. So I'll say, the genres I think of are role playing and fighting, and then of course Metal Gear Solid.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. This console was definitely known for a lot of RPGs. I would also add any 3D polygony type games. There were, where you would be open worldish, like
Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider, and then even like Twisted Metal. These type of games. They were really pushing the envelope with those type of games. That's pretty much it. I think fighting. Oh, this game had a lot of. This console had a lot of sports games too. Don't forget, there was a ton of sports titles that came out for this. Nobody mentioned NFL Game Day as one of the classic titles for this game. But yeah, a lot of sports games on this console too.
Bones.
Well, I don't want to say that there really is a best known for like the games for this, like a genre or anything, just because they did such a good job all around with the variety. I'm sure all of us can name some game from everything, from puzzle to fighting to attack and car to racing. It was just all around. There's good games in every section on that console. And as we stated before, it's going against the 64. Whatever game they released on the 64 that they did on the PlayStation was almost always 100% better.
That level.
Man, yeah, everything you guys have said is exactly on point of what I would say. I mean, the one thing I would add is that there was a lot of great new franchises, that stuff that probably we would have never played had it not come on the PlayStation. Like Tony Hawk. I wasn't a big sports guy, but man, when Tony Hawk came out, I was on board with that. And then, you had like definitely different companies trying their hands at different genres of gaming. For fighting games, you had Square with Total Number One and Air Guys. You even had them going into the shooter market with Iron Hander. Another one that I would note that was a really cool franchise at the time, but really hasn't had the legs like it did with the first two games, and that's Bloody Roar. It's another fighting game.
All right, so number 6 is name some classic titles, but I feel we already did that, so we'll just skip that unless you guys have a title that you haven't already said. Anybody?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Go ahead, Bones.
Yeah, we left out like awesome things like 40 Winks, Time Crisis, Chrono Cross, I believe nobody said. There's a lot of really good titles on there. And not to mention just even the dumb shit that was fun to play from, you played Road Rash on the Genesis. And then they came out with Road Rash 3D. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest game in the world, but at that time it was still pretty neat. And you were playing a successor to the old school game. So I think there are definitely a lot of really good classic titles on there.
Anybody else?
Parappa the Rapper. classic title of this game system.
You guys good?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something. I mean, there's a lot. There's just not stuff we haven't already mentioned.
Right.
Did anyone ever hear of the little game Final Fantasy VII?
No, I'm not aware of that.
It's good. Y'all should check it out.
Brain Dead 13 was pretty fun. It's like Dragon's Lair.
All right, next one. Can anybody name games to avoid from the PlayStation
I got two. I got two.
besides sports titles?
What about sports entertainment titles?
Go ahead, Bandana. What was the two?
I mean, the WCW Nitro and WCW Thunder are garbage. They are hot garbage. And there's some great wrestling. I mean, the SmackDown series.
Yeah, SmackDown is an awesome wrestling game. On PlayStation.
WCW versus the World, which was the game that predated those, which was actually the first game in what would become, WCW World Tour, Revenge, WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy. Like, the first game actually in that series was on PlayStation. But Nitro and Thunder, oh my, like I'm like wanting to run and throw up just thinking about those two games, and that is really one of the few black eyes I can think of on that console.
Anybody else?
Barbie Race and Ride.
There's probably a lot of like generic either sports games or racing games that we're trying to capitalize on, other game successes that are. I mean, I can't name any specifically, but there's probably tons of them that aren't worth your time.
Well, I mean, towards the end of the system's life, I mean, there was like what we'd call shovelware, like there was on the Wii. But I mean, there was like a line of $10 video games that were brand new and $10. So like, there's also things that weren't that great were also then kind of offset by, hey, they were pretty cheap. Like Rockstar did an adaptation of the Italian Job, like the original Italian Job, not the Mark Wahlberg one. And it's great, especially if you got it for $10. It was a fun little racing game, and it put that stuff in perspective.
I'm looking at the list of worst, PlayStation 1 games of all time, and Bandana, here's one for you. Mortal Kombat Special Forces is on there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a bad game.
I know some people say Sub-Zero is bad as well, but I enjoyed it.
Which one?
Sub-Zero.
Ah,
Yeah, Mythology Subs. I mean, it's the best version is on the PlayStation because the 64 has like stills with words, and like you get the full motion video. It was an interesting experiment, is what I would say to Mythology Sub-Zero, and then Special Forces. Just like things kept getting cut and cut and cut, and it's remarkable that game even got out and it is in such a janky, broke state.
and Chris, who's the one who likes really bad games? Is it Bargain Bin? Who
Yeah,
likes
Bargain Bin's usually the
And-
one that picks up the bad games.
And he mentioned before, and it was a podcast pickup for me later, is Bubsy 3D. That's a PlayStation 1 game. As one of the worst games of all time. And I think that goes for a lot of games in general. When they try to go 3D on the PlayStation 1, the technology wasn't there perfectly, there yet for, perfectly done 3D games yet. So a lot of franchises went from 2D to 3D, and usually to bad results.
I remember Earthworm Jim 3D not being well received.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I don't remember that one being very good.
All right, next question. I'll just open this up to everybody. Any memorable hardware or peripherals for the console?
Well, I said the light guns for like Time Crisis. I have those. Those are really cool. I enjoy those. I never got the flight stick. I did want that, but I have not acquired one yet. I remember using the different Game Sharks. Like I had the one that plugs in the back versus the disc style that you had to put in first and then open it up, put your disc in. I don't remember much else though for the PlayStation, so I'm not sure if there is anything else.
The multi-tap.
Yeah, and there's a fishing rod too. I know that, but
Well, I mean, the DualShock controller is.
Yep.
I mean, that wasn't the original
True.
controller, but it's the first controller with dual analog sticks.
That's a
which
big one. Yeah, that's
which
a
would
big
be,
one.
I mean, that's the standard now, and then it integrated Rumble into into the controller itself instead of being an add-on. That to me is the big one because they also, I mean, when they released that controller, they re-released the system, and you'd see the box that was like PlayStation DualShock was like.
And believe it or not, we will be having a podcast on that. Dan came up with questions for a controller accessory type podcast. So that's in the future.
We'll have to pare that one down. Because for Bandana, because there's like 20 questions on that one, so we'll go through and edit them down.
Are they yes or no? Like,
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I have to go back and check, but yeah.
Multiple choice, written answer? No. I would say that for me, one of the things that I remember getting for the PlayStation was the one-handed RPG controller.
I remember that. I have that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. I got that from my mom for my birthday one year.
And I'll say what Bone said, that the Gun Con was a great gun for the system, and they had a really nice string of games there, from Time Crisis to Point Blank, where those games are really fun. And this was also, I think this is the first console that Dance Dance Revolution was on there. So
Yeah.
the dance pad, yeah,
And those were good pads.
yeah.
Even if you didn't wrap them right, and then the
Cable be pulled out of the part that connects to the pad. They were pretty durable. Other than
Yeah.
that.
All right. Number 9. Again, I'll just open this up to everybody because I have a feeling that it should be opened up like this again. If you want to check out the console without the actual hardware and games, what are the best alternatives?
Shit if I know.
a modded PS1 Mini or the
PS3. If you had any of the virtual consoles.
I mean, technically, this question is always going to be the same answer. You can either emulate or, like you said, the Mini. That's pretty much, I feel.
Well, I mean, the PlayStation 3 and the Vita, they had a pretty good, like what I think Dad said was like virtual console.
Yeah.
Which has not been repeated on the later systems. That you could actually, and I mean, they have a streaming service now, right? Or a download service for the PS5 where a lot of classic games are available.
Mm-hmm.
It's their Game Pass alternative.
And don't forget that PS2 is backward compatible with the PS1, so that's a good option. Yeah. And then the PS3, they originally were the original fat ones.
Actually, all the PS3s are PS1 backwards compatible.
Are they?
If I remember, I mean,
yeah, it's only PS1 they're compatible with. It's not PS2.
Yeah, but yeah, PS1 backwards compatibility is on all of the PS3s.
I choose option C. Just go to Dan's house.
That's a darn good option if you got it.
Yeah, go to a friend's house who has a collection, and you can play multiplayer games.
Exactly.
In terms of emulation, PS1 is kind of like on the fence, I would say. So, lower powered chips have difficulty doing some of the games, but some of the earlier games are easy to emulate. So yeah, so Raspberry Pi and those things, it's a little bit hit or miss, but I think we're getting to the point where most of the games emulate well.
Number 10, greatest hits, yes or no, Bandana?
I think I'm well stated being a yes on this. I mean, that is one of my favorite things on the console is those ugly ass lime green shoulder things, just because that's such a hint of nostalgia. Like, we've talked about how many of these amazing games there are, and like a year later they would be $20, and so you could build up a collection with your allowance fairly quickly. And I mean, I don't know about y'all, but when I was younger, I mean, games didn't really have, other than a few, like, didn't actually have hard release dates. They kind of had release windows, and when it was just when they showed up at your store. So that wasn't as big a deal. And so I discovered, I played Crash Bandicoot because the first one was greatest hits. I discovered Twisted Metal because Twisted Metal 2 was $20 in at Kmart. So there's a few games that I don't want the green, Final Fantasy VII being one of them, but I have a special place in my heart for that label and that set.
Bones.
I truly don't really have a preference on greatest hits or not. I mean, at least as far as PlayStation goes, I don't mind the PS1's green, even though, like Bandana said, it's an ugly, like, lime green. That green's my favorite color, so that don't really bother me. The PS2 ones, I don't really prefer the greatest hits, but it doesn't really bother me. The only one that bothers me for PlayStation is for PS3. I don't know why they went to a red case. That I really don't like.
That level.
Well, the cool thing about the red cases is you could just swap those out for all your horror games. And talked about that.
But
It doesn't bother me too much, but like having, I think the greatest hits version of Director's Cut has like a bad soundtrack. Same with the original release of it. So I don't know if I'd want to have that version or not.
Dang.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the original ones, just because. But I will say that PlayStation 1 and the greatest hits concept, they deserve credit for starting the whole idea of that. And every system, or a lot of the other companies, followed suit. So, and it made sense. Definitely, a game comes out, everybody has it, or a lot of people have it, and it does really well. It makes sense to make it even cheaper, so it just like everybody can have a chance of playing it.
All right. Last but not least, the question to me. Do I like sleeving these games? Are they enjoyable? Popular seller? Nice box art? And give an example. Popular seller, not so much because it's CD based. Not too many people want to buy CD based sleeves. Are they easy? Not really. The spine is really small, so to get that crease just right and it hold over time, it's a little pain in the ass. Nice box art, of course. PlayStation has a really good box art. And a sleeve that I'd done for PlayStation 1, which recently Dan just got, was Silent Hill 3D. I did a 3D sleeve, Silent Hill. And I think that's the best one that I've done as of yet. And Dan currently has it.
Yep.
So that concludes the podcast. Let me continue on to the last couple segments here. Podcast pickups, Dan.
Yeah, a short one. We've had a lot of intro podcasts in the meantime, and I just had two games that I haven't gotten too many games, but two that I've picked up since the last topic podcast. One is Ghostbusters NES. We were talking about, Bones. We know Bones' history with the Ghostbusters as games, and we were talking about that. But I did see this on a claim sale for $85 complete in box, a really nice copy of it. So I definitely jumped on that just because I don't have this game in my collection. Interestingly enough, this game has spiked in price recently, and because when I bought it at $85, that's pretty much what it was valued at and everywhere. But for some reason, this game has shot up in value in the last few months. I don't know why, but but that's probably too much to pay for this game in general. but it's something I wanted to have in collection just because we talk about it a lot on the podcast. The other one we were talking about was Mecarobot Golf. Thankfully, this game is not too expensive in general. It's good for about $30. I Frankenstein this game. I got the game loose and then got the box and manual separately, so ended up paying for what it's going for. But the reason why this is on we were talking about this being a nice. I think you had this as 3D or not, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Segment.
Yep.
And I think Dizzy or somebody was saying how it would make a nice 3D sleeve, and we were talking about the golf club and how it would look nice sticking out of the box. And so, main reason I wanted to get it was so I could throw it back at Chris and see what he could do with 3D sleeve, and that's what he's currently working on. And lastly, Bandana, I hope you don't mind me putting you in here, but we were talking about podcast pickups, and the Steam had their sale, a big sale over the holidays, and I believe you said you picked up Mass Effect mainly because we were talking about it as one of the franchises of the month, if that's correct.
Yeah, that sounds like a thing.
Good trilogy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And having it on a handheld is pretty dope because the Steam Deck is awesome.
Yeah, I actually am in the process of doing that sleeve. Actually started doing it tonight, Dan.
Mecarobot Golf.
Yeah, yep.
And it's going to be metal, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, it's like a metallic. Yeah.
It's going to have some metallic. Yeah, it's cool.
Yep.
Dope.
So, yeah, that's in the process of being worked on and probably will be finished in the next couple of days.
Again, that's totally inspired by the podcast. The purchase and the sleeve.
All right, last segment, game of the month. Dan, start with you.
I'm gonna pick because this is a PlayStation podcast. I'm still a Sega Saturn fan at heart, so I'm gonna pick Guardian Heroes for the Sega Saturn. That's a game you won't play on PlayStation.
That level.
Just because I was playing it last night and probably will play it tomorrow. Resident Evil 4 remake.
Bandana.
I think I'm gonna go with recently 8-Bit Glitch picked me up something at Aldo's, and that is the Shenmue 2 on Dreamcast, but the PAL edition since they robbed us of a US edition.
And Bones.
Well, I'm going to keep it on the PlayStation since this has been a PlayStation podcast, and I'm going to go with Chocobo Racing.
Nice.
Dope. Nice.
Nice.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
That's not a cheap game to hunt down.
All right, thank you guys for coming on, hanging out, doing the podcast. That concludes the System podcast for PlayStation 1. I'm not quite sure what we're going to be doing next. We kind of just go out the whim. I talk to Dan about it usually. Then we kind of pick a console from there. Do you guys have any suggestions, by the way?
Yeah, any suggestion for a next console podcast?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know.
Are we specifically working our way up through the different
No,
generations?
No.
It's no random reason.
What about Game Boy Advance?
I was about to say, I feel like we should
Do a handheld?
handheld.
All right,
Yeah.
we can do that.
Do the Game Boy consoles deserve each separate ones or all of them on one?
No, I'm not doing all in one, I don't think.
All right.
Yeah, there's too much to cover.
Yeah, there is a lot.
I think you could do the original in color in one.
Possibly.
Maybe.
Possibly.
Maybe.
I have to look at it to see if it would
mean-
be considered one or two.
I mean, yeah, the color. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll digress. But
We talked about this earlier. We're doing 32X by itself. We're doing Sega CD by itself.
Yep. You kind of have to. Like you can't group them together.
yes, because the 32X is known for its vast amount of things to talk about.
That might be a short podcast.
Hey, it is what it is. Half-hour podcast doesn't matter to me.
I mean, I'm down to talk about the Saturn if you want to talk about an actual Sega 32 thing.
Enough for the CD, so
We'll get to that one, and I'm sure I'll have a lot to say about Saturn.
Yeah, hopefully you're here for that, Bandana.
Try my best. God, I'm here tonight. Isn't that enough?
no, it's not.
Hey,
enough.
it doesn't matter to me. You here, not here, it's all
No.
good.
And we're missing a Bandana rant segment.
Yep.
Chris is stupid.
All right,
Chris is
that
wonderful.
concludes your Bandana rant.
All of a sudden, why am I not in the recording area anymore? It's lovely to be with you guys and not rant.
Well, that's a podcast on its own, really.
Yeah, that should be just every other episode.
Yeah, if Bandana would only make it to the podcast.
Chris, you can do a whole series of podcasts where it's like catching up with old podcasters.
I've interviewed before. What have you been doing lately?
Yeah, I thought about doing that, just to touch base
Doing a
with everybody again.
A second round of interviews.
Not so much the interview. Maybe just group everybody together, bring them back.
Yeah, you can do that.
We'll see. Anyway, that's all. That's all for today. Thank you guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. As always, don't blow, just leave. Later.
Bye.
Good night.
Be well.
Live long and
Go to
prosper.
hell. Is there anyone on this podcast I need? Oh, I like all of you.
Sound check.
Got my controller ready. Let's go. Who's got the
Sound check. Bandana.
Bandana 112. Fuck your modded PlayStation. What?
Bones.
I had one.
That level.
Welcome to your doom.
DanCav.
Hello, this is the merry gentleman from London.